Looks like we've got some people in, so maybe we'll get started. What I'd really love to see is that as we go through the session, if you have questions, you can. If they're burning questions that you really would love me to answer and even, write about in the future, I would love for you to post those in the Q&A so that I can continue to access them. And it'll help remember what you're asking so I can write about it. But for questions today, after I finish talking, go ahead and put them in the webinar chat as well, and I'll make sure I go through those. I'm going to be a little bit more simplistic today. I've got notes. I don't have any PowerPoint slides or anything to offer. So I'm going to be reading a little bit off of notes and hopefully doing a discussion as well. So I'm also going to be writing this presentation into a Medium article as well. So any of the research that I might be discussing will be there available for people. So my platform here on Medium really began. I am a former nurse. I am a master's educated nurse, and I worked in mental health and addictions for quite some time, as a frontline nurse. And then I later became an educator, a university educator, an administrator and clinical specialist. And I really did burn out of that. But I continue my work doing what I'm doing now, but I'm doing it in a very different way. And Medium, I'm very grateful because it has allowed me to create sort of an interesting platform whereby I'm not only bringing in a lot of my professional expertise, but I'm also talking about my own personal experience. And I never thought that would ever go anywhere. And it's very vulnerable to talk about, I myself am a recovering alcoholic. And I've managed my own mental health issues for a long time. And a lot of us that do go into mental health and addictions have struggled with our own issues or have families struggling with our issues. And that's definitely the truth for me. So my platform really began when I started to realize that there was not enough education out there for people that are struggling with addictions around health issues. And this became particularly true watching my own father pass away from liver failure due to alcoholic liver failure. And a lot of my success on Medium, unfortunately, not unfortunately, like it is great to be able to offer this, but it is actually talking about my experience watching my father die, and just realizing that people do not understand this condition, and they don't understand a lot of the health related issues inherent in alcohol use. And it can be even alcohol use that isn't like severe, like ongoing extreme alcohol use. But in particular with liver failure, I recognize that my dad and a lot of people that have passed from alcoholic liver failure pass or get diagnosed just as they're passing. And all of a sudden, the late stages of alcoholic liver failure have suddenly become not like they can't ignore the symptoms any longer. They go into the hospital or they go to their doctors, and then they get a diagnosis, which unfortunately at that point is too late. And what I realize is, if even for my own father, I was like, wow, how did this happen? Because I didn't realize that he was sick, but going back after I did a lot of the research once he passed, I could see that he had symptoms for decades. And so people don't know this. And so a lot of my work is around educating around that. Early symptoms are around, indigestion, slowing down of the digestive system, worsening fatigue, changes in muscle and nerve strength, and worsening cognitive changes. Later symptoms, once things are taking hold, there's high blood pressure, there's skin changes, there's an enlarged stomach, worsening decline in energy and nerve and muscle functions. And then once liver failure is imminent, and this is when a lot of people get diagnosed, there's a cascade of events that are already in flow that is actually multi-organ liver or multi-organ failure. And so a lot of these are like, can't eat anymore, extreme swelling of the limbs and the body, bleeding into the stomach, extreme cognitive issues known as hepatic encephalopathy, where there's a buildup of ammonia in the brain. There's cardiac complications. Some people with liver disease pass of heart attacks before the liver fails because of the backup of blood into the thoracic area that's causing cardiac issues. But there's also other, like there's kidney issues, and then and severe malnutrition because the person is no longer able to eat. So a lot of my work has been around this, and I'm so happy to continue educating people, and I will continue to do it. But what I started to realize now is that it's not just knowing our health, like knowing the health issues that are inherent in alcohol addiction that will help people quit. I mean, it certainly wasn't for me. I knew that I had some of these health related issues, but I completely ignored them. I still think that people knowing it can really add to the dialogue, at least get people diagnosed early and all of that. So I will continue that work. But I am moving forward into possibly helping people and myself. I will always be a work in progress, and I'm working alongside with people of what we can do to actually improve our lives and quit. Because as we know, a lot of treatment modalities in for alcohol addiction and substance abuse addiction, some of them they have a little, they work for some. The numbers aren't great, but then they work really well for others. And so it's really this sort of individualized process. And a lot of the research that's coming out, and still there isn't enough research done on this. There really isn't. But whatever has been done has advocated for multiple modalities, multiple therapeutic things within medicine itself to help. But I'm thinking, and there's new research coming out now, and some of this isn't even in research, that there's a deeper emotional component, and that's really where my passion is starting to manifest, because it was true for me, and I know it's true for some other people. And that is around us understanding the background of why we drink to begin with. It's really addictions, as Gabor Mate has often said, addictions are about stopping up emotional pain. And a lot of that emotional pain comes from childhood trauma, or even, traumas we've sustained as an adult. But most of us have some degree of adverse events in our childhood that that overwhelmed us, that we are unable we didn't get support for it. And substance abuse is a way to soothe that pain. So for me, a lot of the treatments that I have done that have worked for me, and this will not be true for everybody. So by all means, whatever anybody does that works for them, that's great. All I can do is offer, because this is my platform, I offer my own personal experience based on research that I've done. And so I realized that to get to the heart of our addictions often is, the reason why we have to cover up the pain with the alcohol in the first place. And what I think is important is that a lot of these modalities do have a couple of issues that they all cover that are separate. One being like getting connected to the self, like to the self, the highest self. And that is also, there's a consciousness to it. And that also involves getting to know who we are as people, what happened to us, how we felt about it as young people, and how that's continuing to come into our adult lives. Also, there's an aspect of connection. I think Gabor also speaks of this as well, and some other addiction experts too, that connection is really key. Making sure we have socioeconomic, political access to care, access to good jobs, a supportive community, things like that. So for me, I have utilized several practices, and I'm going to speak about them because that's where I'm going. I'm also going to be offering individualized retreats down here where I live in Mexico. I'm Canadian, but I live in Mexico. And people can research these as they will. There is some that are gaining some popularity. So I'd like to speak about them now. For myself, I've undertaken IFS therapy, which is internal family systems therapy, and I find that model does explain a little bit of our addiction parts. So IFS talks about our personality parts that we've had to develop in childhood. We all have parts, and they're very helpful and they're very useful. And we're a multiple of personalities in ourselves. And this is actually quite normal. But in childhood trauma, some of these parts become protective, managing, so that we are not feeling the pain of the thing that happened. There are sections of our personality that have been exiled with those traumatic experiences that had to we've had to continue keeping them exiled so we don't feel that pain. And so a lot of our protectors come in to help us. And one of those protectors is addiction. And addiction is noted as a firefighter. They call it a firefighter part, which means that we use those to stop up those emotions very fast. We don't want to feel it. Our our milder manager parts, they've failed. Let's get to the alcohol. We do not want to feel. So I find that really helpful because what it shows is how much we do really want to not feel our deeper feelings. So in getting to our deeper feelings and understanding ourselves and getting that sort of treatment going, there's a couple of modalities that I've used that have helped me with that. And certainly the therapeutic approach, the IFS therapy, that's a one-to-one, making a relationship with a therapist. It's psychological. There's lots of studies that show being in therapy as well as trying to get sober, really, really important. And that's a therapeutic modality I really highly suggest for anybody. And AA is great. People get involved in knitting groups, Tai Chi, sober groups. All of that is fantastic. If it works for you, phenomenal. Keep doing it. One of the things that really worked for me, and that's actually got me sober, was psychedelics. And this is now an upcoming topic. And I'm going to be addressing this a lot more in my Medium writing as we move forward. And psychedelics, I've been doing them since 2014. I started off with ayahuasca, and that's actually what got me sober. It took me 2 years of doing ayahuasca ceremonies to actually decide to quit, and I did. Since then, though, I've switched over to psilocybin because psilocybin is a little bit milder and it has actually a lot more, there is a lot of research that's been done around the use of psilocybin, helping with a variety of health issues, and addiction is one of them. And there's research coming out even now, like really new updated stuff that's really showing how effective this is. And I find that even for myself, microdosing and psilocybin journeys, what it does and what the research is showing is how psychedelics can kind of create those new neural pathways, so that when we're trying to create new habits, such as a new habit of being sober, these medicines can actually come in and kind of take our default network offline, the one that says, the habit towards drinking, the habit towards stopping up the pain, needing to soothe. We take those offline and start to look at what's the higher self in there. Who are we as people? What is the pain that we're holding? What are the traumatic memories that we've been holding? And then making more sense of those in a symbolic, creative way within within the mystical experience of the psychedelic experience. But actually, neurologically, there's studies showing that these medicines can help with our nervous system to move away from that sort of biological addictive pattern and help us kind of rewire our systems while also helping us look at um, our memories and how we can create new narratives out of them so that we're not stuck in that story all the time. And it just, for me, it has made all the difference in my recovery. And my recovery is ongoing. I've been sober for, oh gosh, 9 years now. And it's always ongoing because there's all kinds of reasons why I drank the way that I did. And so this will always be a lifelong process. Now, I must tell you that not everybody can confront emotional pain. Not everybody can do psychedelics. Not everybody can do some of the modalities that I'm going to talk about. And that's not a bad thing. And it really does depend on the level of like how rigid our nervous system is, like how much and how entrenched we are in some of our stories, how the insight that we have, the ability we have to sit with those emotions. If somebody has had extreme amounts of trauma and has a very like sort of a more rigid type of nervous system, it's going to be very difficult for them. You can't just say, oh, well, why don't you look at your pain in your childhood and all these things. For some people, that's actually far too overwhelming and can re-traumatize. So I want to preface with that because not everyone can do these things. And that's where it comes into play, where we would love to help ourselves and we'd love to help our family members who are actively in addiction, but we can't save everybody. We just can't. And it's not a fault of anybody else or the person. It's just that for some people they can't. Like my father, he did end his life through alcohol use. I'm sure he knew that there were things going on, but he didn't have whatever the emotional resources, the physical resources, or he just did not have it in him to be able to do that. And part of my healing around that has been like accepting that. So I'm not going to suggest that everybody that has an addiction, you must, like, if you go to therapy, if you do psychedelics, if you do all these other modalities, you're going to be great. That's not true. It depends on the person. So the other, a couple of other things that I've been working with myself is yoga nidra and energy work. And this is a little bit esoteric. You know, this is now I'm coming out of my research nurse background and moving into this other place. There is still some research around how yoga nidra works that we can't, and it does, again, it gets us in touch with our higher selves. It gets us in touch with our bodies. It gets us in touch with our emotional being, our states of consciousness that are closer to who we are as people, where we can then rewire our nervous system. And that's the key, is that when we have trauma, and I know that, you know, other experts have talked about this, when we have trauma, our nervous systems become wired for fight or flight, freeze or fawn. They become wired into the parts that want to protect us, the parts that want to stop up the pain. And the goal there is how can we kind of undo that wiring a little bit and come back to our natural state, because all of us are born, and this is very spiritual, but all of us are born with a sense of self. And that self is the thing that can guide us, that can help us, and move us through, you know, better decision making and really being in our adult self that says, I'm gonna take control of my life, and I'm not going to allow my, you know, inner child parts to make decisions for me, because our inner child parts want to soothe. They want soothing, they want protection, and because that's all they knew at the time. So, you know, yoga nidra for me has been extremely helpful in helping me calm down. And it's hard to even tangibly explain how it works. I just know that after doing it for almost a year, all of my systems have calmed down, you know, considerably, and allowed me to access parts of my consciousness and my decision making that had been really helpful for me. And the same goes for, so for energy healing, which again is so like out there for some people, but I'm training both to do yoga nidra and energy work, as well as doing a psychedelic assisted therapy certification. So I already lead people in psychedelic journeys. And I'm hoping to add some of these things to what I'm doing to help people. I mean, and energy work really is, if you look at the research around meditation, there's not a lot of difference between that. So um, that's basically my talk. I would love to, if there's anything in the chat, um, I will look at, let me look at the chat here. A lot of people thanking me for the work. That's amazing. And a lot of people, yeah, one of the things that I notice about even when I write my articles on Medium is a lot of people are coming to me wanting to know how to help their family members. And it's so painful. I know I've lived it. I get it, especially if it's your child. That is like a whole other level of pain. I know even watching my father was really horrible. Um, I'm just trying to see if there are questions in here. Uh, if anybody's interested in the work that I'm doing here, just keep following me on Medium. I'm also on Substack. I'm also doing online consultations right now. I'm offering those to help people individually, give them some ideas of what they can do. So if you're a person that's got a family member and you're not sure what to do, you can book a consultation with me and I can help you there. What was the theory you mentioned about personality development? Oh, I think you meant internal family systems. So yes, I would look up internal family system. It was founded by Richard Schwartz. It's quickly becoming a very popular therapy model. Highly recommend it. It's extremely effective for a variety of problems. You still get that one-on-one individual therapy, that you create an attachment with your therapist, and that really helps people. But it's also very trauma focused. I find the most trauma focused type of therapy that there is, and it really helps with addiction as well. Oh, I see a question here. I've had a lot of people telling me I'm trading one addiction for another. What are your suggestions? That's interesting because, when I was trying to get sober, I did things like I got into mountain biking really hardcore, like exercise, and to be honest, it did help me. I did start drinking less. However, I did develop like I went overboard in that and started hurting my body a little bit through working out. I mean, is that better or worse than harming ourselves through substance? I don't know. Um, it's one of those things that where like even harm reduction really does look at trading at one addiction for another that's less harmful. And I think that can work. And if that's what people have to do, that's what they have to do. Certainly there's been some questions um, around using psychedelics as a drug. Are we trading one addiction for another using a substance? And let me tell you, if you've ever done psychedelics, you will know it's anything but it's not always a pleasant experience. So you're not really feeling necessarily good out of it, although you can have really good experiences with it when you connect to that higher consciousness and you connect to your higher self. It is beautiful, and people do want to chase that a little bit. But most of the time, the psychedelics it's a medicine that is helping your nervous system calm down, come out of that default network and move into um, like a state where we can change it. What else? I'm just gonna look to see what other questions. A lot of people interested in the microdosing journey. And yes, there are interactions with general medications like antidepressants with psychedelics. And so that's a big deal. And I wasn't going to address all of that right in this presentation, but I am happy to, again, if you want to book a consultation with me, I'm happy to really go through that. It's a very complicated process. Not all SSRIs or antidepressants will interact with all the psychedelics. So there's certain ones that you absolutely cannot take with psychedelics. So I can counsel you, and I'll probably do some articles around it as well. Do you do any one-on work with trauma that presents as a personality disorder? So personality disorders are really interesting, and personality disorder is like a very advanced kind of it is like taking trauma and moving it to the next level. And personality disorder, it depends on the level. It depends on how much self the person has on board to actually be able to work with psychedelics. Sometimes the personality disorder can interact with psychedelics to where it becomes a little too overwhelming for the person. So I do a screening process for this, and I do ask some questions around how much, how many resources the person has, what are the supports they have, how do they handle altered states of consciousness? Because if personality disorder is like to the point where you cannot access self, it may be difficult to get into a psychedelic journey where all of your protectors, all of your personality disorder things that are there to survive become offline, and the person can have a really terrible experience and may not actually help them. Switching to non-alcoholic drinks. I think that's great. I don't have I mean, I switched to like bubbly water with lemon and honey. I still drink that to this day. But non-alcoholic beverages are fine if it works for the person. If it's tempting to the person and it's just making them cheesed off that they're not drinking, might not help. Ketamine therapy. I have not done it, but I've been training around ketamine therapy and I hear good things about it. I would suggest looking at ketamine therapy that also incorporates psychotherapy with it. Some of the ketamine treatments are doing just, you go in, you get your treatment. You might talk a little bit with the practitioner, and then that's it. And that's actually helped. There is research showing that it's helpful, that it's still helping people, but it only lasts for a couple weeks. But if you couple it with that psychotherapy, then we're looking at a good combination there. How do you recommend approaching an employee that you're worried about? Well, within workplaces, there's often there should be anyway HR related supports around addiction in workplaces. If you are in a workplace where you do not have that capacity, then it would be, you would have to then confront the person the way you would maybe a family member, which really, yeah, it's a delicate topic. Like you want to let the person know that you're there to support them, but you also have boundaries, um, addiction does cause problems for other people. Like we do sometimes in our not meaning to, or we do sometimes manipulate situations where we are causing trouble with our work, with our family, with our relationships. So being compassionate, but with boundaries, saying, hey, this is what I'm noticing, and I really think you need to get some help. Yes, I'm reading comments here about family members that have had CPTSD, and addiction. You know what? It's really common that CPTSD and PTSD, all of the trauma stuff is so linked with alcohol addiction. It's not even funny. We don't talk about this enough. The research has not done enough to really show this, but it's just so clear that this is what's happening. And like we've got to get better about treating these things. So I think that the more we talk about it, the better we'll be. So I think that's all for our session. I'm really sorry if I didn't answer all your questions. I hopefully will be able to look at the chat or the transcript, and I'll go back and write some more articles around the stuff that you've been mentioning, and feel free to consult with me, and feel free to connect, and I can explain more about what I'm doing here. Thank you so much. I really had fun with you guys. It was really great to be here, and enjoy the rest of your medium day. Thank you so much.